I've been wanting to make a film about metal detecting for ages. I wanted to try and make it slightly different to a lot of the other films I've seen on YouTube, most of which are jolly good, by the way. And now that I'm stuck at home, see my previous video, link below, for why. I finally got a way of doing it, and I'm going to do it from here. It's not so much about how to metal detect. I'm not going to show you, obviously, from here, and I didn't really want to do it this way anyway, how to swing and how to turn your machine on and everything like that. It's more how to get started, i.e. you've got the idea, you've seen it in newspapers, you've read magazine articles about it, you've watched YouTube videos, you've had the idea for a long time. Metal detecting is becoming so popular at the moment, and it's just started to cross your mind. I really want to give this a go. How do I even start? So this video is probably not going to be, unless you like listening to me rambling on, for those who already know about metal detecting. So please don't get cross or upset if you think I'm covering things which maybe to you are just too obvious. I really want to strip it all back right from the beginning to give those who are just thinking about it an idea of where and how to start. And having thought about this for quite a long time now, I've decided that the obvious starting point is not your equipment, not your metal detector, and all the things that go with it. I'll talk about that in a later video. Land is the most important thing. And it's not just land, it's permissions. There's no point in even thinking about it or buying any equipment unless you've got somewhere to go. And that leads us onto the subject of permissions. All of the land in the UK is owned by someone, and you need their permission to detect it. That's basically what it boils down to. It's as simple as that. Acquiring permissions is a skill in its own right. There are lots of things on how to go about getting permissions. There's a very good section on the detectinghub.co.uk. I'll leave a link to that website below. It's a very informative community which will help you with all sorts of aspects of metal detecting, and there is a permission section on that. One way to go about it is to just directly ask the landowner, effectively knocking on their door. I lived in Hampshire for a long time, and I did quite a lot of door knocking. To be completely honest, I hated it. I wasn't any good at it. The amount of times, I think I got one very small permission from doing it, and I got knocked back 100 times. I found it very difficult building up the confidence. I got very nervous at the door when someone answered. One of the reasons, more often than not, is that farm owners get asked the entire time, and their stock response is usually no, you can't. And there's an endless amount of excuses that they'll give you, quite rightly. Some of them fair, some of them I felt not so fair. They want to do it themselves. They're fed up of getting asked. If they let you on it, they're going to have to let everyone on it. Someone once told me that they couldn't for tax reasons, for inheritance tax reasons. God knows what that was about. More often than not, they'll slam the door in your face. Detecting, as I said, has become very popular. People are asking all over the place. You've got to find your way around that. I did actually, by sheer accident, watch someone once gain a permission. I'm not going to go into how and why, but I was there at the time, and this sort of semi-elderly gentleman arrived at the door, knocked on it, and walked away 3 minutes later with a big smile on his face, having secured a permission from the farmer's wife, who said, and I heard her saying, well, come back whenever you want. And I was just completely gobsmacked. Anyhow, the point being was that he was just incredibly confident. He wouldn't have minded getting rejected in the slightest, and he'd obviously done it a million times before. And it's just incredibly impressive. Some people are very good at it. Some people like myself are not very good at it. I've been very lucky. I grew up on a farm that my brother farms now. It's been done for decades by detectorists. But I'm still finding stuff, years and years later. And growing up on a farm, I knew our neighbouring farmers. And I've got permission from them to go on their fields. Again, they're fields that have been done for years and years and years by detectorists. But there's still stuff coming up. So I would say swallow your pride. It's not a case of swallowing your pride. It's trying to get enough confidence out there just to go out and ask. And don't mind being knocked back. You don't have to go door to door either. You could write the old-fashioned way. You can email, do all those things. They're all hard to do, and I just wish you the best of luck. One will lead to another. I have no doubt about it. You can almost just in your local pub just drop in conversation that Colonel Biggins lets you on his land and you found a lovely Georgian mill silver coin that you gave to him, and he was really pleased, and the whole experience was great fun, and la-di-da, la-di-da. And if people like you and they start trusting you, then they will let you on their land too. The local pub's a very good place to start. Anyway, it's a horrible thing to have to do, but you're going to have to do it. You need to get permission. And if you don't have any luck with permissions, or you're just finding it too hard or too depressing, it's not the end of the world. There's plenty of places you can still go and dig. The beach is one, but we'll come on to that in a minute. There are digs organised by clubs all around the country. You usually have to pay a bit, but it will give you somewhere to go. And usually they're not bad places either. On top of that, there are enormous rallies held all around the country all year round, often on very good land, and often very good things are dug up and found on these rallies. You'll meet lots of like-minded people, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it will definitely give you somewhere to go if you're having trouble finding your own permissions. It also slightly boils down to whether you like detecting by yourself or not. A lot of detectorists are horrified by the thought of detecting with other people. A lot of detectorists can't bear the thought of not detecting with other people. They find it very boring. It slightly depends on which field that you fall into. I personally quite like detecting by myself, but I also like detecting with like-minded people as well. I'm lucky. I like doing a bit of both. But if I was given a choice, if I had to pick one over the other, I'd probably do it by myself, because I like just to switch off and just start daydreaming more than anything, and you can't do that if you're having to talk to someone or keep shouting over that you found something lovely. Anyway, I digress. I'm moving off the point. Right, so we've done that. Permissions done. Hopefully, stick at it. You'll get some. Now, land. You basically have three options. You've got the beach, you've got arable, and you've got pasture. They're all different skill sets in themselves. Some people like doing all three. Some people tend to stick to one more often than the others. It all depends on you. I'll say something very quickly about the beach, which we'll start off on though, is that not all detectors are geared up to be successful beach detectors. It's something to do with the sand, the mineralization of the sand, the salt, the water. I'm not quite sure, but do check if you're going to be predominantly doing beaches that you've got the right machine to do it. Most of the UK beaches are owned by the Crown Estate, and I'm not going to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of it. Basically, it means you're allowed to detect. You don't need to ask too many questions. You've got to obey certain obvious rules and regulations. A lot are just common sense, but you are allowed to detect on them. What is not owned by the Crown Estate is often leased by the Crown Estate and will be under similar laws. If it doesn't fall under those two categories, then it's probably privately owned and you would have to ask permission. But I think that they do tend to be, even the privately owned beaches tend to fall under similar sort of categories. I may have got that all wrong. Please let us know in the comments below if you've got anything to add to that. But I don't think it's particularly complicated. And neither do I think you should overcomplicate permission and stuff on the beach. I don't think you can go too far wrong. I'll probably get into trouble for saying that, but anyway. So the beach is somewhere which is basically free to go, and permission is easy. You will need a detector that can handle the beach. I have done it several times. I really enjoyed it. It's not completely my cup of tea, but I know several people who do it fairly frequently, who do really concentrate on it, and they find loads of stuff, not just modern stuff either. There's a chap I know who finds Roman coins and Celtic coins on the beach. So don't be too dismissive of doing the beach if it's not necessarily your cup of tea. If you get good at it and you know what to look for and where to look for it, you can have great success on the beach. And if you're having trouble finding permissions on land, or rather on internal land, then the beach might be a very good place for you to start. Secondly, arable land. Now this is my personal favourite. By arable, I generally mean cultivated farmland, used on a fairly yearly basis for crops. A lot of the farmland that you can see today has been used since Iron Age and Roman times. In fact, I don't know exactly how much, but probably as much land was farmed then as it is now. Farming's become so much more intensive now, but in the old days you needed more land in order to produce sort of a similar amounts of food for your population. There are pros and cons of arable. The main pro is that stuff gets turned over all the time. It's not fashionable to deep plough or hardly plough at all these days, annoyingly. They can even direct drill, which is basically putting seed straight into existing stubble. They hardly turn it over at all. But most fields, more or less, every year or 2 or 3 years or so, will get turned over. And that has the effect of bringing stuff to the surface. You'll also find that you'll see stuff on the surface. I mean, I've found Roman brooches and coins and all sorts of things just lying on the surface, which do get turned over. It's also handy for being able to understand the land more. Being arable and being turned over and being just soil for quite a lot of the year often, you can notice where there's pottery, where there's glass, where there's stone which it's not really in keeping with the local stone, whether there's stone very obviously that's been used for building material. There's all sorts of things that you can look out for in arable land. I absolutely love it. It can get very, very sticky and very, very muddy when it's wet. It can also get quite hard when it's dry and sort of packed in. But generally speaking, it's easier digging. It's not quite as hard work, and stuff is getting turned up. So you don't need necessarily to have a machine that's going to, take you down to the bedrock. You will find stuff fairly near the surface. If you can get a permission on arable land, that's absolutely brilliant. Now, pasture runs sort of in conjunction with arable land as the seasons go, because one of the cons about arable land is that for most of the year, or definitely a good chunk of it, it's got stuff in it. It's got seed in it. It's got wheat, rape, whatever might be growing, but stuff that means you can't go on it any longer. Some farmers are very nice about the fact that they don't mind you going on when it's been drilled. That is that the seed's gone in, and that maybe the shoots are just starting to show. You don't do any damage to crops at this stage unless you've got your bulldozer out, so don't feel too worried about going on fields if you're allowed to before they become sort of really properly sort of set. Just be very careful and fill in your holes really properly. But it means that come certainly early spring, and quite often way before that in the autumn, if you're putting in winter crops, arable goes out and you're going to have to wait till it gets harvested, and then you've got stubble to deal with more often than not, and that's not easy to do. And since they don't really get rid of the stubble as quickly as they used to, you've got whole tranches of the year when arable land is really just no good. So then you've got your pasture. Pasture is land that has been basically left for grass for whatever reason. Usually it might be parkland, or it might be for grazing, or it might be for growing silage on, all sorts of things. It's basically grass, undisturbed grass. If it has been sown for silage and stuff, that's probably more arable. I made a mistake there. But not to say that the pasture hasn't been turned over in not quite living memory necessarily, but certainly during the wars, a lot of what is now very set pasture may well have been used for food production, for the reasons that the country just wasn't producing enough food for itself anymore. We were importing so much that during the wars, when that was less easy to do, we had to grow our own. So a lot of land was previously just pasture, would have been turned over, and therefore you still might get stuff surprisingly near the surface on certain bits of pasture. It's generally heavier, harder work. You will need sharper tools, spades, etc., to get deeper into the ground, and it can get very, very hard in the summer when it's dry, which you shouldn't really be on it anyway, because when you're digging grass when it's very dry, it doesn't really take. When you put the clod back in, you'll find that that it just doesn't grow back nearly as efficiently, if at all. So it's good practice really not to do pasture when it's very dry or there's not much rain about. But the thing about pasture, technically you can probably do it all year round if you get a nice permission on pasture. There are 3 different skill sets on each one, and it is fun to do all 3 if you can. But you may find yourself wanting to do one more than the other. The last thing I'll say about pasture is it's very romantic pasture. There's something more mysterious about digging something up out of what feels like it's undisturbed grass. And sometimes at quite some depth, you feel that whoever dropped it's just gone like that ever since, till you've gone and found it. There's something very special about digging in pasture, actually, I must say. I'm warming to it more and more, even though I do find it slightly harder work. Anyhow, I hope that helps just a little bit in what to expect from the land and what you've got to sort of think about before you even buy any equipment. Good luck with getting permissions. I know it's hard work. And it's not much fun either, unless you really don't care when people tell you to sod off. If that's the case, you'll be really good at it. That's been really fun to do. So Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back very soon with part 2, when we will just talk, we'll properly talk about what equipment you're going to need to use. Thank you very much.